It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.
All right, gentlemen, say hello and introduce yourselves.
Hey guys, I'm Chad Jetner.
Hello, I'm Peter Lawrence.
I'm Kyle Bacher, and joining us today is our own low-code leader, Ben Story, who I've been working with for 12 years, probably thereabouts.
Yeah,
and doing a lot of low code.
A lot of low code. We really like our low code at SDG.
Yeah. Peter and Chad, maybe not so much, being coders, purists.
We're big code.
Oh gosh. No, I absolutely adore the low code solutions. Any opportunity that presents itself that will allow me to write less code, huge fan. Huge fan.
That's true too.
So Ben, why don't you start by telling us exactly what it is? What is it?
Yeah.
What is low code? LC.
Yeah, well, the term low code, I mean, as with anything, can mean a lot to a lot of different people. When I think of low code, no code, I think of tools that allow me to drag and drop, whether it's text boxes or whether we're thinking about workflow, tools to put on a canvas, whether that's designing an application or maybe designing a form or anything like that. And then if I want to get into other extensions, I can then maybe add a little bit of code, like write my own extensions, my own APIs that then become drag and drop functionality tools within the toolbox for my low code tool. So it helps me develop faster and write less code, and opens the door up for a lot of other people to help and support things too.
So when you say canvas, that's almost like paint, right? Or something like that in the old days where you drag a square or drag a triangle or something like that.
Yeah. A lot of it's, in the low code world, you have your designer, and within that designer, you're building visual applications more on the front end than you are on the back end. So you're kind of getting the what you see, what you get right out of the box. So the application is going to kind of look and function the way you build it from a low code, no code tool set.
Yeah, it's I was thinking about this a lot, because I've worked with SharePoint and Intex and Office 365 and InfoPath and all that kind of stuff for years. There's low code for building applications. There's low code for creating the pages. It's it's widgets, configurable widgets, drag and drop. You have actions and connections and things for logic. If this, then this, wait until this date. All that's kind of pre-baked in, and you're playing with Legos more than just sitting writing lines of code. Because I can't code. I can only steal code.
There are many here that will attest to that.
But the nice thing about that low code helps bring us is, as long as you have a logical mindset and can understand how things are built, you can translate those thoughts into really good solutions. So people that, like myself, I got started writing C#, doing the really heavy coding on the back end, writing custom SharePoint web parts with C# and Visual Studio and all that kind of stuff. And then started getting into InfoPath and some other low code tool sets and SharePoint in particular, and just found that I can build things faster for my clients than always having to write code. And writing code was never my favorite part of my job to begin with. I just did it because that's just what you kind of did coming out with a computer science major, or like an MIS major too, or whatnot. So when I had the opportunity to kind of transition and take my development skills into a low code environment, and understanding of the business, it helped really drive some really fun applications.
Yeah, I went right from my broadcasting certificate right into Fortran. Like, that's just the.
I think
way
that's
it
the
happens.
path. Yeah,
As one does.
that's how you get started on Fortran, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So we have built many, many low code applications, and SDG uses many. Yeah, the ability to quickly develop and deploy solutions is, I think, one of the benefits, and we've done that a number of times.
And I also think too, just from a support angle, we only have a small group of people that can help support things, and we're all billable and we're all working outside of our normal things, but we also like to help the company succeed too. So, being able to quickly build an application that can be easily supported, and it's not a lot of legacy code that needs to be updated constantly, I think really helps us with our low code mindset within our operational functionality.
But we have specific examples of that, right? Like when the pandemic hit, we not me, you guys, Kyle and Ben and everybody.
Well, Kyle,
that's not Chad.
Kyle begging for help.
Up a lot of low-code solutions. To
we were able to take our HR onboarding process very heavily paper, and kind of over a weekend with some tweaks into the week could convert that to a completely paperless no code solution that our new hires didn't even have to come into the office to complete anymore. And Kyle has been inaugural in supporting and leading that charge too at SDG, and really kind of taking on most of that development now, which helps me too.
Yeah, we had the new hire paperless before the next new hire, and we had the yearly retro paperwork paperless before the next retro.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was like scramble mode. But we had all the pieces in place to do it. So we brought in the digital signature piece already for others, for the security stuff. So it became, like way more functional for us. And having that in place has helped us in a lot of other ways. So we use it, there's probably daily, somebody somewhere is using a low code solution that we built, at least once a day somewhere.
Yeah, my retro's coming up next week.
Yeah, I've monkeyed with yours. I did make some specific changes to the workflow. So
work that in.
When I was thinking of, like all the low code stuff we've done, and where my low code career began was with SharePoint Designer, and which had XSLT behind the scenes and XML. And so you had the page builders though. Like that's the only possible way I would have got into it, is I could click and drag and fill out forms and, do things that way. And, but it was a lot more fragile. The bumpers weren't quite there, and you could break your own stuff or make it really difficult to work with in the future.
Well, it had a lot of limitations too.
Yeah.
As that's just one of the things, going into low code, knowing what the limitations are, whatever low code tool that you use is going to be a very important thing, because you can do a lot of really cool stuff with them. But, as we all know, like we're all realists, we know that you can't build everything in a low code tool set. So
that was going to be my question.
Knowing those limitations, right, is really important. And there's a lot of interesting things that you can do with low code. Like we use it for a lot of process automation and some really quick hitters around online forms. You can get into building some pretty cool IoT things with it as well. But I've seen a lot of people just use it for testing. Like, hey, I got a bunch of these ideas. Let's just test out a bunch of these ideas and see which one works the best. Because they can iterate through a bunch of kind of POC kind of type of deals on the front end. And then kind of once you go through and figure out what if your idea works, then you got the roadmap or the crossroads of, all right, do we continue building this in low code, or do we not? Now, do we need to look at, all right, we need to bring in some heavy hitter developers to do that as well.
I will say that's one of the challenges sometimes is in business, to show how much can be done with low code, that it sometimes raises the expectations about some of the other parts of the development happening just at the same speed, right? So
Yeah.
if you whip up 3 different front ends that do things completely differently and show it to the business, and they're like, awesome, that only took you a week and we're almost there. Now go build me the rest of this whole entire giant process.
So your low code experts need to know when to switch to code.
Yeah.
And your code experts need to know when to switch to low code. Do you see that happening?
Sometimes I think there's, and I think it's kind of this new kind of buzzword that's going around is called the fusion development. And it's building out a development team that maybe is IT pros, or maybe some low code developers and some regular, coding, the developers who are really good at coding too. Because you have to be able to iterate fast, and you need to be able to call in for reinforcements and extend platforms at some point to make sure that your project drives to success.
I mean, you can't, so you can't get started doing all low code and then hit a wall, right? I mean, you have to be ready for that wall.
Yeah, because then you're spending twice as much, because then you got to rebuild it in a coded platform. So, knowing those limitations and having really good sessions on the front end around making sure your business requirements are pretty solid are important in those. And low code's come a long ways too. Like just thinking of where Microsoft is going, like they got Azure DevOps built into Power Platform now. You can build chatbots pretty easily. Some things that might be a little bit harder to build on the coding. We can build things differently on the low code and still provide some really nice functionality to extend platforms as well. And there's a lot more integrations too coming. Like I think one thing I saw is like GitHub interactions for governance and code sharing, and even getting in and doing co-authoring on an application now is possible in some low code tool sets.
Nice.
Where when you're thinking about code, like you gotta check out your code, do your code, check it in, and then the next person has to make sure they're getting their updates and pull those updates down, and then they can do their thing. Where everything is so on the front end with these low code tool sets, we can be in there co-authoring and working on the application together, and maybe chatting through some sort of chat tool on the side to work together.
That's an interesting point, like just having some of the coding features and some of the remote work features coming together in that low code space. I know you talked about like sort of the boundaries between low code and code. I guess we'll call it that. They're not black and white, obviously, but as long as everybody's aware and keeps the other side in mind as they're going along, you don't get into that conundrum where 10% of the work takes 90% of the time because you're trying to do it all in one platform and really force it, right?
Right.
So
yeah, you're 100% right. Yep.
It was 80-20 for a while.
Was it?
It'll take you 80% of the way you need to go, or the distance you need to go, and it'll do 80% of the things that it claims to do. So
They've added
that
more
was
connectors.
that was like a whole different world ago. The tools have gotten so much better. It's ridiculous. Some of the things they've even done in the last couple of years in Intex with the objects. It's like I rejected it. It's like, this is a new Doctor Who. I do not like this. But then I fell in love with it.
Yeah,
because it looks
when
great.
Nintex brought in objects into their variable platform, that was a game changer because
Yeah.
if I wanted to query any data source, I needed to build a separate variable for every piece of data I was bringing back. And now we have the use of objects where I just build one object variable and now I get everything back and save so much time in the development of your business processes.
Yeah. You still have to do all of the, the requirements gathering and kind of really understand the business problem you're solving, and then understand, in the tool how to solve that problem. How it works, what fits together, the logic. So it's not like anybody can just jump in and do awesome stuff, but I've seen a lot of business users go out there and pretty quickly figure out kind of some new ways to automate their jobs or parts of it.
And do you see that when business users do that, they're trying to get around IT, right? Because they're not getting their questions answered fast enough.
Yeah.
No idea what you're talking about there, guys. IT's my best friend. Always on my side.
And obviously not saying that IT's bad, but just think of the massive amount of requests that come in
Resource
to an IT
constraints.
department, right?
If you can empower people, it's just smart.
Right. And that's where I think low code can really come in and help, because reading some things like they're predicting even a shortage in developers. So it's like, who's going to handle all these requests that are coming in, because apps still need to be built, right? From an enterprise standpoint. And if we don't have enough developers, or you can't find enough talent, then you got to look elsewhere, train people, right? And can't always train people to write C# or Java or know what Spring Boot is, right? But you could train them to put them through some classes and teach them how to drag and drop and build some things, because they kind of know what they need coming from the business. So that helps.
You can really increase your talent pool to work on this stuff. So
do you think
if I can do it, you can too.
Do you think it's taking us back to the Excel spreadsheet access database days a little bit, or are we beyond that because of all the benefits of low code being expanded in, and some of the components and the connectors that you have can be sort of controlled by the company, and you kind of use this connector, don't use that connector, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. No, you're right. I don't think we're going quite back that deep, because the sophistication has come a long ways in our low code tools.
Yeah, not with Workflow Cloud, Nintex, that kind of, with all of these companies kind of becoming cloud-based solutions, you get better, I think, visibility on your organization as a whole, because you have that, admin view into that app and everything that's going on. So versus every, different department having a site buried somewhere that has a list tied to it, you just don't have that level.
And then being more cloud agnostic too, where with governance, you can log into a cloud-based platform to do your development. Governance is a little bit easier because you don't have to worry about locking somebody's machine down so they can't install certain software or can't install this thing or can't install that thing. It's, from an IT standpoint, if you got one cloud platform or maybe a couple cloud platforms that you're using, like a Nintex or a Microsoft 365 or whatever that low-code tool set might be, it's easier to control that permissions, who sees what components are you using, what connectors are you allowed to use, because we don't want somebody just going willy-nilly and building a connector into some third-party system that maybe hasn't been approved.
So Ben, when we talk about Nintex and Azure and all these other load code solutions, it's great, right? Like, it does help. It's helped us a ton. What are the drawbacks to go in that direction, right? Like, is there I would imagine that there's a little bit of vendor lock-in, right? Like, some of these solutions don't necessarily seem portable from one vendor to the next, right? If you're deep into Nintex, you're probably locked into
if you're kind of going in, you got to make sure you do your homework, because once you kind of get locked into that thing, if you wanted to move like your tools from like a Mendex to an Appian or something like that, like, you got to completely rebuild that application if you're trying to do any sort of migration. So, there's definitely that drawback is, company goes under or whatever, or lack of support comes through, what are you doing? Then, you got to spend a ton of money and rebuild something. But even from like a Nintex to Power Automate, there's no migration path there either. It's a complete rebuild, even though they're two workflow tools as well. And, when you're kind of getting in on the front end of the design, I think some of the other components, UX, can be kind of touch and go with some of these low code platforms, because when you're getting into code, you can kind of make that thing look as pretty and identical to that design you might get from your UX team. And
you don't give the designer a blank sheet of paper and a color palette. You give them, like, here's this component, here's what this could look like, here's these different options. You just don't have, like, okay, we can do this without code for you, but you're going to have to take what you get. Beyond that, we're gonna have to make something custom.
So when we take, customers of ours and other friends down this low code journey, what are some of the things that we can do, that we suggest, to help mitigate, like, the lock-in factor, or kind of the constraints around the design and everything else, right? Because I'm sure there's a few pointers we can give folks, right?
And it kind of just comes back to the limitations. Like, when you're working with your design team, they just need to know, what box we're working in, so they can color inside the lines. And it's sometimes, and I haven't got a chance to try it yet, but there's some really cool tools out there like Figma, and Microsoft built a connector now for designers to build things in Figma to then directly import them into Power Platform. So that, I think that could definitely help the designers color inside the lines a little easier, because you're getting the exact components that you can use in the platform in your design tool set to do imports. So that I don't know. It's a tough question, because every platform is different, but just knowing those limitations is a big thing.
Well, I think too, knowing that
really, there's benefits too, right? Because as a designer, you have these limitations, sure, but also some of the other things that you would have to consider, like accessibility and all the other less sexy aspects of a design, or maybe some people really love. I know I'm working with a UX person right now that actually loves designing for accessibility. It makes her feel really nice. But like, you're kind of
just more
offloading
work,
that
though.
work onto the vendor for when you're doing low code stuff, right? So you're in a little box, but also, gosh, that box can be really nice, and it takes care of a lot of overhead that you would have to build into a custom built solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just got to be careful not to do the kinds of things that'll get you in trouble. Like, and just because you can do it that way now doesn't mean that it's going to change. So you have, is this a customization that if it fails is going to break stuff and stop our business in its tracks? Or is this a customization that's going to like change the font to something that's really close to it? Like that's different, because that's not going to really break anything. That's going to be an annoyance that you have to deal with.
So those are kind of the challenges of extending these tools a little bit
Yeah.
beyond their comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Peter, when you worked with the low code platform that you worked with, what were some of from a coding, I mean, you're a pretty heavy developer. Like, what did you feel like? I mean, you like to write code like that. I mean,
I love to write code. I live to write code.
I know that you've worked with a couple of low code tools before. I mean, what was kind of your experience working with those, positive and maybe or negative on things that you learned?
They're super
right?
powerful for doing those things that they're built for, right? If you want to do something repeatable, boring, something that I don't even want to code because it's like, whatever. I don't want to code that. That's so boring. That's where those low code things come in and really knock it out of the park. They've taken all the weird stuff out of it and made it, or taken all the coding out of it, obviously, and made it repeatable. You set a few parameters and bam, now you've got the thing in a short amount of time, and I don't have to do handshakes and connect up, authentication. I don't have to do this or that or the other thing. It's just all kind of handled for me, and it really helps out. It obviously doesn't do everything for me, which is, knowing that line and knowing which side you're on, I think is probably going to be one of the important things to keep in mind. People try to push things a little bit beyond, where they're sort of supposed to be, and try to do it all in a tool, or we're only going to do this in low code. And I think that's sort of the wrong idea. Do the things in low code that make sense. Don't go for the everything. You'll pay.
I look for ways all the time for us to automate something, improve the quality of the information we're gathering, the accuracy.
Workflows is one where low code just, I think it was built to do workflows, right? Like it is a workflow animal. It tracks things, sends emails, gets approvals, all of those things that take a lot of code to do if you're doing it manually in like C# or Java, and dragging a few things onto a canvas to make this approval necessary. That's what that tool does, and that's where it excels so much.
I mean, how do you feel about like because I feel like also low code can shine on the API side too, because a lot of these companies have connectors already pre-built, so you don't always have to be writing custom web services to do a lot of things, where you can just drag and drop some actions or some web service API calls on your canvas and connect up with maybe a service account or something to do some heavy lifting for you. Just because like all these cloud-based systems now, they all kind of have their open APIs to be able to push and pull data out to connect. And like building low code tools to help do that, I think is kind of also where they can shine as well.
I've done some work with some of those, almost like they're low code, but it's kind of like glue, like Zapier, right? That was a cool one, right? Because that would allow you to do almost exactly what you're saying, Ben. Like, here's an API that I want to consume, all right? And I'm going to consume this, I'm going to pull an API, and then when this changes, I'm going to fire off an event over to whatever, right? And it hooks into, gosh, darn near everything. Super easy to consume a JSON contract, take action on it, and then spit it out. Stuff like that. Like, so Peter, when we were talking about this episode, Peter was talking about what was the word you had for it, Peter? If to poop. What was it?
If to fuck.
It was
If to ta.
If
ta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. If this and that, right?
Right.
But yeah. But that's so if this and that, Zapier, like tools like that, previous engagements, I've gotten a lot of utility out of things like that to automate, just, not have to write a lot of Java code to automate just like an event-driven something, right? And it's almost like an evolution of old school middleware tools like Tibco, right? Like we used to write, Tibco was, you could almost consider that a shade of low code, right? Like there was, you had your bus and you had all the events that you could take action on, and it was, you'd still have to write some code around that, but you deploy that as a middleware solution, and all of a sudden, bam, you've got some exotic migrations fairly quickly, and it was really cool. And some of the web-based versions of these tools now are just as cool. So like Nintex is awesome. I love what we've done with that. I also love all of the other varieties of low-code glue services out there. And AWS has a handful of them now that they're developing and providing as a service too. So it's, the landscape is blowing up.
What's cool about that is like to have a centralized low code automation solution or something like Nintex, but then there's going to be things that the cloud versions of the low code apps that are in Azure and AWS, there's going to be things that those solutions do better or tie into better. So, but you can actually like then just reach out to those to another little low code thing that reaches out to what you're trying to get to. So you can make these kind of modular solutions. We did that with integrating
our new hire.
Yeah, the application stuff we did. We had to use Logic Apps in Azure.
So kind of chaining together low code solutions to build a different low code solution, right?
Yeah.
And the nice thing is all those are going to keep being updated, right? Those low code solutions get updated by their providers all the time.
Yeah, and that's I think another big kind of component, or what I like about it is I don't have to keep track of legacy code all the time. The companies they're spending the millions of dollars on security to make sure their API calls are secure and everything else is secure within it. And they're getting and going through all the compliance checks to make sure it's all HIPAA and, all those different things that we have to take into consideration when we're building custom apps. They kind of just handle a lot of that for us. Because they want to make sure when data is going in and out of their system, it's encrypted and transit and rest and all that kind of stuff too. So it's important to them.
But you do have to do some configuration and checking into like how to apply those tools that are available, because they're not all there right out of the box necessarily, like a lot of cloud solutions.
Right.
But no, having the staff that does that, like a floor full of people that do something versus your tech support jack of all trades that does everything adequately.
You're Kyle, that is the IT department.
Yes, I'm Kyle the Adequate. Yes, slightly above average. It's Kyle the Adequate. Here to fix your computer.
But having all our kind of internal applications on one or two low code platforms definitely helps you from a support standpoint, because you don't need to learn a bunch of different things or know how to fix some lines of code. It's we need to re-authenticate here or re-authenticate there, and I need to add another email to somebody, so I'm going to just drag and drop this email action onto the workflow to make sure everybody gets their notifications right. So it's kind of nice.
There's always little tweaks that happen and changes that need to be made. And my turnaround time on those is like 10 minutes. It's so easy for me to go in and make changes to stuff like that. Some things are more difficult, but than 10 minutes at work. But most of the time, it's just real simple. And now
the other benefits. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, and now everything's going to like the cloud version of the apps, which have way more functionality and tie way better into our other systems. So the future's bright for low code.
I was going to say one of the other benefits to this stuff too is, when we develop software, right? When me and Peter are doing whatever we're calling the opposite of low code, code plus plus,
high code,
right? Like we'll develop, right? We'll develop, and it's if it takes us 4 hours to whip up a new API or to whatever, right? 4 hours, we commit it. It goes through our CI/CD pipeline. It goes then to QA. QA passes it. That goes to UAT. UAT passes it. Then we push it to stage. Then we push it to production. And that entire process could be, a week, right? From us committing the code to us being in production with a new API, with a fixed version of whatever, right?
Right.
If you double our productivity, if me and Peter are twice as productive, right? And instead of coding in 4 hours, it took us 2 hours, we still have that whole week, right? So doubling my productivity, it doesn't really do much.
No.
It doesn't have the effect that it really does. But with low code, that's not necessarily always the case, right? Because you are in kind of a constrained environment. You don't have to deal with, I'm sure you guys do QA in a form of UAT on a lot of what we do, but like we literally turned around our business in a weekend using low code, right? So all of the process and all of the formalities around software development, that whole paradigm is a little different when it comes to low code, right? Because you can just whip up a solution, test it out in stage almost immediately, and if it's properly UAT'd, properly QA'd, you can be in production a lot quicker than we can.
Yeah.
True or false? It's true.
I think it's true, and a lot of these companies kind of give you built-in test environments, so you're not having to spin up a test environment, spin up a dev environment, make sure test, dev, production, they're all the same. Like they're all kind of there for us, already built in. So it really helps speed up the development and kind of move those features or releases or whatever we're working on through the test and production launches and things like that too.
Yeah. The key, like you're saying, is the QA afterwards. The importance of doing that same stuff you need to do, whether it's low code or high code, top code, ultimate code.
Kyle can still type an email address wrong, right?
You got to have people
sure.
beat it up. Find really detail-oriented people that bug you because they're so detail-oriented, and then find people that will use it completely wrong. And you'll have some good QA.
Yeah, and it's important to still have your QA stories, right? Like you still gotta go through your QA checklists to make sure, hey, let's enter in some wrong data here or something and see what happens. Because we want to break our stuff just as much as you guys want your code to break, to make sure that it's as rock solid as we can make it.
I don't want to fix it when it's an emergency. I want to fix it before it's an emergency. My process is pretty fast for building this stuff, and like the user testing can kind of be fixing as we go. Like they're looking at stuff and then I'm fixing it as we're
That's
talking
a little different
about
too,
it.
yeah.
And so that, but I think having that short time might kind of like give you some bad habits, like thinking that it shouldn't be another week. Well, it is, because you're going to kick the tires on this thing all week long with different people and make changes and get it ready for production. But because you can do it so fast on the front end, it's like, hey, let's do it. It's ready.
It's still
And
humans.
then, yeah.
Right.
And then your people QA it in production, which is much more annoying.
Only when they find problems. It's when they don't find problems that works well, right? Oh, look, it worked perfectly this time.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are we talking about for tools? I know we've thrown about some names, some Nintex and some Zapier and things like that. Are there others, Ben, that you're working with or talking about or looking at?
Right now for us, it's mostly Power Platform through Microsoft, and then Nintex, the Nintex cloud system that they have as well. And we're always kind of evaluating some things. We've looked at OutSystems, we looked at Appian, and some of the other big players as well. But just for right now, like Microsoft is such a behemoth when it comes to, so many organizations have Microsoft 365, and a lot of organizations still need a lot of help with governance and setup and developing the apps and bringing in our expertise to help with that. So that's where a lot of our expertise is right now is on the Power Platform, including Power BI, and then Nintex, building out forms, workflows, documenting business processes, or robotic process automation.
That's where our clients are right now, and so that's where we tend to stay. Right? We don't.
Yeah.
We still look at the new stuff, but we can't move there unless we get somebody to come along with us. Right?
There definitely needs to be a need for us to be able to take that step into a different platform, and right now, we just haven't seen a lot of it.
Yeah. During platform selection for a customer, it's like, well, this is the right tool 6 months from now when they put this feature in. Like, okay, where are we going to be at that point? I added like 3 months to the deadline. I'm like, yeah. I said, if we get here and it's not ready, it'll look like this.
It'll probably
this is what we're risking. You could only do that with low code. Going back to, I guess, code versus low code, like where that marriage is. Do you have that on the brain when you're working on applications, Peter or Chad?
I mean, I'm always looking for an easier way to do the things that I want to do, right? Sometimes I'm being guided by the client's choice of platform, things like that. But oftentimes it's like, well, tell us what the best way to do this is. And, if this is one of those cases where just like, we don't want to do that in code, because workflows is the perfect example. It really is. It was kind of where things started out and where they've really taken off. But doing workflows in code directly is not as easy as dragging some shapes onto a canvas and making some actions with those shapes. It's just not that easy. There's, every drag and drop is doing a lot of things behind the scenes to, even if they're using, Microsoft objects underneath, they're still doing it so much for you in the tool. It's why they exist, right? Some of them, it's like we have workflows and we are going to win the workflow wars. So, looking for those easier things, or those things that, like, well, I could write a chat bot piece, but why would I? Because it's just not that fun. It's like writing a whole app just to take one line of input and then take another line of input from another app and put them into a window. Yay. Not my favorite thing. How about you, Chad?
For me, it's, if I want to integrate a low-code solution into a broader product offering that I'm building out for whoever, the first thing I look for is extensibility, right? Like, how hard is it going to be for me? Because I know I mean, 100% certainty that at some point you're going to hit whatever limit you have with the tool, and then what, right? Because then you might, oh, it's the one thing that's going to be out, like Kyle said, it's going to be a new feature in 3 months. Well, cool. I'll just tell my my customer that I'm going to hang out for 3 months and wait for that to happen, and see how that goes. So I'm always looking to see how extensible is it, how durable is it, feature release cadence, like what are they doing to improve on the tool? I think like Iftita was a great example of that. Like for a while, they were just throwing out new things, new integrations,
everything. Yeah.
That's I plug Zapier a lot too, because at the time I was using it, they were throwing out brand new integrations constantly, and they had an incredibly active community around it. That's what I do, and so I get nervous a little bit sometimes because of, we mentioned access a while ago, or things like that, right? Like I've dealt with a lot of situations where, oh yeah, this one small group is just built out their own access database. We got to figure out how to integrate with that.
Right.
And this is why, like, one of the things that we could recommend is just document the hell out of every low code solution. I mean, if you're going to be locked into a vendor, make sure you've got wonderful swim lanes, right? Like build out some gorgeous diagrams around whatever the solution is, so that you know, and guys like me and Peter know, hey, if we're gonna want to integrate with something, we've got to take into account, this one department that build out this one form over here that actually contains mission critical information, right? We got to know that it exists, and we got to know that it's something that we'll be able to integrate with. And if we can't, we got to know that the tool or the platform that thing exists on is extensible enough where we could write a plugin or an extension or whatever the heck that particular vendor calls customizations to their platform. That's what I look for. I do think it's great. I mean, I think that the whole concept is pretty slick. It takes a lot of the commodity coding away from Peter and I, we're happy to bill to do commodity code, but I think our customers would be happy if we didn't, and we had a package solution. Peter's going to unmute.
We're willing to do commodity code. We're not happy to do commodity code.
I'm happy. I mean, yeah.
I mean, coding is coding, and it's fun. You're right.
Well, and it is fun to see the big players like AWS, like they just released like 2 or 3 new low code like tools to help their developers. Like even thinking from like a serverless architecture standpoint, there's ways now on the AWS platform to build out serverless architectures faster, using some of these new tools that they're releasing. So, people are taking notice. I do think it's not going anywhere. I think low code's kind of here to stay, right? In some capacity. Well, it'll be fun to watch the future and see where development goes, because like obviously we don't know. We can guess, but which is kind of fun sometimes. But it's just gonna be fun, because the sky's the limit on a lot of these things, and where these tools go, and just being able to run hybrid projects and integrations and have everything in the cloud. I think it's just going to make all of our lives easier, whether we're writing custom solutions or doing low code things.
I mean, the cloud has definitely changed low code for the better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, from my perspective, the tools have never been better. And so getting better than they are now is exciting. That's going to be exciting to watch, the stuff that we'll be able to do. And then, I'm always looking for ways to use these tools when they make sense.
Right.
And if I hear something somebody's doing, I'll be like, you might not have to do it that way. There might be a better way. I might be able to help you with that.
Always looking for ways to incorporate some sort of automation to help, because some of my favorite things that I hear when my clients are like, hey, that used to take me 4 weeks and now it takes me 4 hours. Like that type of ROI on using low code tools to help help somebody out in that particular business case it's awesome. Like, so like, yeah, always looking for ways to integrate, make things better, faster.
So, Chad, any parting thoughts for you?
The way that Peter pronounces the acronym "if this then that" is awesome. That's my only parting thought.
He really hits those.
So I'm
keys.
hoping, Peter. I'm hoping I'll hear it one last time before we go.
The if-ta-ta-ta?
If-ta-ta.
If-ta-ta-ta.
Never heard that before. Never heard that before you said it earlier this week, Peter. That's awesome.
I think low code's here to stay. I think it's going to get better. I think it's growing. I do think that as long as you keep an eye on the boundary and not try to do, it can't do everything. It's never going to do everything. You don't want it to do everything, but use it where it makes sense. That's my thought. Kyle?
But I would say definitely, if you don't do it now, if you don't have it now, look into it. And just be aware of the kind of things you can do with it to see those opportunities, because I can't think of a business that wouldn't have a lot of benefits from these tools, and be able to save themselves a lot of time and effort with
1,000,000%.
repetitive tasks and things like that. So, yeah, Ben.
No, I agree with y'all. I definitely think low code's here to stay. I just think there's going to be a more and more demand for it, and there's always going to be a demand for applications, and trying to figure out how to support those applications. You might have to turn to low code for some of them. Like, you gotta, like Peter said, stay within the boundaries and just know limitations. But I definitely think every company should be looking at integrating some sort of low code tool set within their organization to help them out, because if not, they're going to fall behind, and they're not always going to have the expertise to keep up with demand. And I think low code can help keep up with demand.
Awesome.
I like that.
Well, with that, I think we'll say goodbye, everybody.
Oh, goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com, or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.